Authors Over 50, Writing in Life's Sweetest Third. Authors Over 50's weekly podcast celebrates writers and their journeys to publication. Writing after 50 is a whole story on its own, so let's skip to life's sweetest third and talk with authors about their journey from pen to publish. Welcome, I'm Julia Daly, your host, and I invite you to listen to interviews with writers who've achieved their goal of publishing a book just later in life. We've seen award lists for under 30 or under 40, but I've yet to see lists for those who've achieved a significant milestone of their own, launching a new career and publishing their first book after the age of 50. We will hear about these authors' inspirations, struggles, strategies, and the smell of that first book. These writers' journeys inspire me because I'm one of them. My guest today majored in English at the University of Alabama in Huntsville and worked in the technology sector and in an administrative capacity. For 15 years, she and her husband owned a professional photography studio. She has dedicated the last 16 years to developing her craft of fiction writing and is also regularly covered with sawdust and paint from whatever craft or remodeling project she has undertaken. She's the mother of 4 grown children, grandmother to 2, and she loves a snarky tabby cat named Zero. Unbroken Bonds is her debut novel. Welcome to Authors Over 50, Dawn Hogan.
Thanks for having me, Julia. I'm really excited to be here.
Dawn, our opening question on Authors Over 50 is always, so what took you so long to write your first book?
Well, it really didn't take me that long to write it. It took me that long to get it published, is what ended up happening. I wrote this book when I was maybe 45. And, I sent out queries and, I got very nice thank you, but no thank you. And it ended up in a drawer. And then in 2019, I went to a writer's retreat in Vermont, and they asked me to put it in a pitch contest. And I did, and I got second place and People's Choice Award. And a publishing contract.
Nice.
So that was exciting.
Very exciting. We have a lot in common, being Southerners and writing about adoption. Tell us more about your inspiration to write this book.
Unbroken Bonds started because a really close friend of mine brought me her unsealed birth documents, adoption papers, and asked me if I would help her find her birth mother. And of course, I knew about homes for unwed mothers, but the more I started finding out about them and what was done during the baby scoop era, we're talking 1950 to 1980 is what's considered the baby scoop era. And when I found out about these homes, I was like, I couldn't stop going down that rabbit hole. I read everything I could possibly get my hands on. Ann Fessler's The Girls That Went Away, Ricky Sollinger's Wake Up Little Susie. I got on the internet and looked at all of the message boards, and their personal stories just really haunted me. And I wanted to write a fictional novel because people don't know about what it was like. I mean, this was a time period where the worst thing a girl could do would be pregnant and unmarried. And society was different. It was a very shameful thing, and they'd stick them away in these homes until they had their babies. And then they would convince them that if they really loved their baby, they would do its best and give it up for adoption, and then not tell anyone and go on like it never happened, which is ridiculous, but that's what they were told. So
that's exactly my life. I was one of those babies who was relinquished for adoption in one of those maternity homes. Very interesting.
It's a deep hole. And it's funny because whenever I go out and I'm speaking about the book, there are at least several people in the audience who have been touched by this. There are, they said, when I was first looking at this, it was 1.5 million girls went to these homes. And then when you look at the gray and black market babies, it's between 4 and 6 million. So that's why everybody knows somebody that dealt with this firsthand. So
yes, in the U.S., 100 million people have adoption in their immediate families. That's a lot of people.
It really is. So I really wanted to tell that story from the girls' points of view. And in my book, these 4 teenagers stay friends for the rest of their lives. And while everything changes in the country, and it's not such a, stigmatized thing to be a single mother, they have to change with that. And of course, tragedy strikes, and they have to decide whether they're going to find those babies that were pretty much stolen from them. So.
Well, I know you had this friend who had a true life story, but how did you determine the plot of your fictional book?
Well, I definitely wanted to be so true to the experiences. So I used a lot of the stories that I heard and read about, and incorporated them into the characters in the story. But I wanted to take it further than that because of the repercussions that happen afterwards. So many of those girls that went through this ended up in abusive relationships, struggled with drugs and alcohol. And for a lot of them, they really didn't feel like they deserved better because their self-esteem had been crushed so bad that that's the way they viewed themselves. So, and then not having any kind of counseling or anything like that, at least my 4 girls in the book had each other, to talk them off the ledge. And that's, so much about what female friendships are, is having those friends that you can pick up the phone and go, help.
Well, I know that you were picked up through this publishing contract. Did you experience any challenges during your publishing of this? And can you tell us about any publicity that you found that works for you or doesn't work?
Well, marketing is the big thing, I think, for everybody. And even if I have a small publisher, Woodhall Press in Connecticut, and even if you have a large publishing house, you're still going to market your book. So there's been a lot of learning that goes with that. And as far as what works or not, it's really hard to say. Since I have a traditional publisher, it's not as if I can see in real time that what I just did has produced sales. So I don't worry about it. I just, keep plugging away and sending out things and getting in touch with people. And last week I did a book club, and on Sunday I'm going to a library in Collegedale, Tennessee, to do a local author series there. So, you get some hits and you go with it, and you just don't stop.
Well, set us up a scene in the book and then read from the book so we can hear your tone and voice.
Okay, I'm going to start from the very beginning, and it's just a short little section. This is the beginning of the book, chapter 1. The look on her father's face was one she'd seen far too often. Without warning, he lunged across the kitchen, crashing into the light bulb that hung from the ceiling by a cord and now swung wildly. He pounded his fist on the table. She hated that light. She hated that kitchen. But most of all, she hated her father. So you got yourself knocked up, eh, Joanna? Harris Wilson's words spat anger. Joanna's brown eyes blinked back the tears she wouldn't allow. She set her jaw to subdue her anger. A wave of nausea swept over her, caused by the bitter aroma of brewing coffee. Who's the father? Harris Wilson's booming voice carried through the two-bedroom apartment and assured he'd wake the adjacent neighbors. I'm not going to tell you, she said through gritted teeth. You little tramp. Shh, Harris, please. You'll wake the babies. Her mother started with a fearful visage. Don't shush me, woman. Harris raged at his wife. Irene kept her voice low. It's time for decisions. What are we going to do? She can't stay here. Maybe she could go to Aunt Vanda's in Murfreesboro, Irene suggested. Sitting at the far end of the table, Irene frowned. Taking a sip of coffee, she smoothed her gray brown hair. No, that's no good. How is it acceptable for you to bring a bastard into this world? I don't know. How many bastards of yours are out there? Joanna's words no more than left her mouth when her father's forceful fist struck her. Joanna glared at him. Salty blood warmed her tongue as she licked her broken lip. He tightened his fist as if he might hit her again. Instead, he turned and stared out the window at the converging pink hues of the early morning.
That's so descriptive, and I can just see that playing out across this country with so many young women.
Well, and it did. I mean, then they would go to the homes, and there was always the excuse of where they went. She's gone to take care of her elderly grandparents. She's traveling abroad. She's got a job in another city. And the one that really got me, and I used in the book, was she had a mental breakdown, and we put her in an asylum.
Oh gosh.
They would rather tell people she lost her mind than she was pregnant.
Well, did you have to conduct a lot of research before you began the project, or did you do it as you went along?
The deep research was done ahead of time. Like I said, I couldn't get enough of hearing about these homes and getting as much information as I could. But of course, when you're writing it, you have to do research as well. And it was like I needed to find out how long it took to get from Knoxville to Memphis in 1957. Well, turns out there wasn't an interstate highway in Tennessee at that time, which was kind of cool because I used it later in the book when Jack is opening truck stops. So he buys property that's going to be right where they're going to be putting in the interstates. So it's like, okay, cool. It took a lot longer than it does now. And
well, you were actually a search angel for this friend of yours who gave up her baby for adoption. And you actually found her birth mother, didn't you?
I did. And I actually talked to her sister, gave her all the information, and she didn't want anything to do with her. And she has since passed away. Not my friend, the birth mother. But and my friend really, her major thing was, I just want to see what she looks like. So we did find a picture of her, and she said, I really didn't want anything from her. I just wanted to see what she looked like.
Well, that's very typical. And also the fact that we were not left with any health records when we were adopted. A lot of us wanted to know what was in our background, because when you go into a doctor's office, they'll say, do you have diabetes or cancer or heart disease in your family? And we'd always have to say, I don't know, because I'm adopted.
Absolutely. And that's very important questions. And when I've talked to a lot of adoptees as well, and it seems to hit this desire really to know about the families. A lot of times it hits when they have their first child, because this is a person that is the only person I know that's my blood. And then it becomes important to know all of this because now you have a child. So it's it's a little overwhelming, I think, sometimes.
That's exactly when I began my search, when I had my first child.
It's the experience of many of the adoptees during the baby scoop era.
Well, what did your friend think about you writing this story, even though it's not her story? How did she feel about you putting this down on paper?
Oh, she was thrilled, absolutely thrilled, very supportive. Um, Came to my book launch, and she came to my book launch and she brought her adoption papers for people to look at to see what it was that actually started this book. So that was cool. Yeah.
Well, Dawn, do you have any other books in you?
Well, yeah, I've got a bunch that are in various stages of ugly that would need a lot of work to put out there. But I'm going to do NaNoWriMo again this year. Um, that really sets you back up in a really good way of writing every day. And that one is going to be set in Alabama, um, probably starting 1948 or 1848, and going through suffrage. So I just finished a series with the Bessemer Library. It was a discussion about women's suffrage, and we read like 5 books and had Zoom meetings, and it was very, very interesting. So
Nice.
got a lot of that research out of the way.
Well, I did NaNoWriMo for the first time last year. And that's how I got my second book completed within a year. So it really is, for those listeners who don't know, it's National Novel Writing Month, and you commit to writing 50,000 words in the month of November, which is 1,667 words a day. That's a lot of words. So, the
Some
one thing
days,
I learned is that I had to learn not to go back and edit, not to worry about punctuation, just get the words on paper, and at least you'll have something to edit.
well, and you're going to edit it 20 times anyway. That's I love Stephen King's advice on writing. Don't worry about spelling, punctuation, grammar. Just get in the chair, fingers on keyboard, and write.
Yes. Very important, but that is a motivating a month, and it's also National Adoption Month. So I'm sure a lot of people will be interested in your book for that reason as well. What do you think was the best money you've ever spent as a writer?
Honestly, it's joining the Women Fiction Writers Association. I really enjoy being part of that group. The historical fiction group meets every Tuesday for a Zoom meeting, and it keeps you motivated. And you're helping them, and they're helping you, and it gets you excited about what you're working on. And I'm going to their retreat next week, and really looking forward to that. So, I mean, it's really, you've got to have that camaraderie and the support of other writers, because otherwise this is a really lonely business.
It really is. And it's a humbling industry. And so to have other people have those same experiences, I think helps all of us.
Definitely.
Do you believe in writer's block? Have you ever had writer's block?
Yep, absolutely. It's where my imaginary friends stop talking to me. um, and usually what I try to do if I'm really stuck is when I'm going to sleep at night, I'm trying to work this out in my mind. And a lot of times I wake up in the morning and I have a solution because my mind has thought about it. And sometimes you just have to walk away and come back to it. And it usually will work itself out. And also, if you're really stuck, read for a while, read somebody else's work. And I mean, as a writer, you have to read a lot and listen to how other people's books flow. And it really can help you get over being stuck.
Well, that was my next question is, do you still make time to read for pleasure? And if so, what genres do you like?
Oh, I read all the time. In fact, I read your book. Um,
Thank you.
I I haven't reviewed it yet. I just got finished with it. I do love historical fiction, probably the best. I love Kristen Hanna. But I read a lot of other things. I belong to a book club, and one of the good things about being in a book club is you'll pick up books you wouldn't normally read. The bad thing about a book club is sometimes you pick up books you wouldn't normally read. So I read a wide variety, but mostly women's fiction and historical fiction.
Well, I belong to a couple of book clubs as well. And, we used to just tear those books apart and talk about what we would have written and what we would have done. And now I'm just so much kinder now that I have a book in the world. I'm just so much kinder to authors and I'm defending them to the book club all the time.
If it was easy, everybody would do it.
That's exactly right. Does writing energize you or exhaust you?
Mm, it's probably both. It just depends. Um, you know, doing the marketing and getting a an event set up or something is very encouraging and very energizing and makes me want to write more. And then, those times where you get writer's block or, for all of a sudden, you're really not liking the character as much as you thought you were going to like them. Um, that's the hard part. And sometimes just finding the time to sit down and actually write um, can be aggravating because life gets in the way and you got to make it a priority.
Yes, and I have found that audiobooks are working better for me now. I can listen to them when I'm on a long car ride or on my bicycle, and I don't have to look at the words on paper. And so that keeps me from finding typos and trying to edit somebody else's work in my mind.
Yeah, I like the audiobooks too, especially if it's a nonfiction. I read a lot before I go to sleep at night, and if it's nonfiction, a lot of times I'm falling asleep way too fast, and it's like it's going to take me forever to get through this book.
Dawn, what did you edit out of the book? Was there anything that hit the cutting room floor?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, and this is they gave me they presented me with a publishing contract and said you have to cut a lot of words. This is way too long. And I think a lot of first time authors, that is one of their mistakes is the book is way too long. I had to cut 60,000 words.
60,000.
60,000 words. And I actually had a dream that I cut off 3 of my toes. No joke. So, yeah, I understand. So now what I'm writing, I make sure that I keep that under 100,000 words. Just good rule to go by, 70, 80 is even better. So, yeah, that was painful.
I guess so. I worry about cutting a chapter and not 60,000 words. That's a lot of words.
Well, it was amazing how many times I used the word just.
We all have repeat words that we always use sprinkled throughout.
And it is, unnecessary.
Yeah.
So I went through and took out a lot of those kind of words. But yeah, 60,000, it was a lot.
Well, Dawn, as always, our last interview question is our writers are a unique set. Do you have advice for writers 50 and above?
Absolutely. Just sit down and write. You've got the advantage of experience. You know what it's like to raise a family. You know what it's like to be a grandparent. You've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly in life. And at this stage, you've got stories to tell. So write them down. No time like the present.
I agree. I'm interviewing people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s, and they're still writing beautiful work. So I think we can do it the rest of our lives.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for being with us today. And we are proud to say that you're now one of our authors over 50.
Oh, thank you. I'm honored.
Thank you for joining us today. Please look for Authors Over 50 every Thursday when we will have conversations with accomplished debut novelists over the age of 50. Please subscribe and share with a friend. And check out my own publication journey after 50 at www.juliadaily, that's D-A-I-L-Y, like dailynewspaper.com. Until next time, keep reading and writing. And remember, it's never too late to fulfill a dream in life's sweetest third.